Welcome back to the channel, Crypto Trend Trader, with a quick update on Bitcoin. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you it's not financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. These markets are extremely volatile, so please do your own research and trade responsibly. Alright, so I have Bitcoin on the 4-hour, looking at the Bitstamp chart, and here we have gotten the move up. I was saying that I thought that we had topped out based on the bearish pin bar looking candle at the top of the range, essentially hitting our target of 11,800 or falling just shy, depending on what market you were looking at. After we did that, we pulled back down to this main area where we had essentially been putting in a little bit of support, got another attempt back to the upside, and put in a similar candle as well, a violent sell back off and rejection of higher prices. We were then able to find support at a higher low and then move up once again, putting in a lower high, at which point in time I identified inside the group that this was starting to look to me like a clear head and shoulders pattern playing out. The neckline diagonally ascending slightly, also the resistance on the top end for the shoulders ascending slightly as well, and then finally the rejection point forming the head inside of the triangle for the head pattern. Now, what I look for with the head and shoulders is not necessarily a horizontal neckline, shoulder line, but I like to see the left shoulder, a clear correspondence, interaction between the neckline the whole way through, and then the right shoulder as well in a parallel fashion. So although the bottom neckline is ascending slightly, it's angled slightly to the upside, so is the shoulder ascending slightly and angled to the upside. And then we have a clear higher high for the head than either shoulder, regardless if it's ascending, descending, or just a horizontal pattern. Now, in the case that I am correct here, and that was our right shoulder of the pattern, we take the measured move, and the way we do that is we just take from the top of the head to the bottom of the pattern, and then we'll just move that down to the break point from the neckline, and you'll see that's already in place there. And what that would take us down to, a confirmed candle close on a 4-hour below essentially what works out to be 11,300 roughly at this point, would give us the measured move down here to the 618 in green, the 382 in orange, and also a long-term trending horizontal line at 10,732. Now, in the event that this does play out, that will invalidate the 1 through 5 wave that we were looking at. We had gotten the 1 up to the top here, the 2 pull back, 3s to the top here, and then the 4 pulls back any more than roughly like that $11,064 range. That's going to invalidate the target. Now, in the event that this underperforms on the sell-off or does not sell off as much as the measured move, that would correspond with this descending purple line, which was from our top point, our second point, and that was what was forming essentially our descending broadening wedge. And what I had said was, when we came back down, came up to the top of the descending broadening wedge, and then found support on the central line here, or the heart line, the most likely thing to happen when you're going to break out is you'll sell off to the bottom, come back up to the top, come back down to the halfway point or the intermediary of the pattern, and then find support and move to the upside, at which point in time you'll get a break, a sell back off to retest the breakout point in red here, and then continuation to the upside. Now, once again, that's going to line up with a couple of our other targets here as well. Essentially, this zone here not only is going to line up with the horizontal, not only going to line up with the red line of the descending broadening wedge, but also our green support line, since we put in the low back down here in September. Now, that September 5th low, roughly, or around that time, essentially we put in a higher low, and then move back to the upside, at which point in time, if we can come down and find support, we would put in another series of higher lows, at which point in time I would expect continuation to the upside and at least a retest of the 886 of the orange pattern right here, or even potentially a move back up to take out the high of the entire pattern itself. Now, even if the Elliott wave becomes invalidated, that's not going to change my point for a possible bullish move back up to the upside. But the main thing we're looking for is what happens with price action when we sell back off. Do we find support here? Do we find support here and then get support and continuation? Or do we sell back down and then inside of this pattern, or start taking out any of these series of lows? Now, the most important one initially, if we start selling off to the downside, is obviously going to be this range right here. But if we continue to sell off and take out this low right here, which is roughly going to be in that 10,300 range, that's when we need to be very, very careful. But until we actually take out the low on candle closes on a significant time frame in this 9,800 range roughly, we can still come back down all the way and then get continuation to the upside. Now, once again, if you look at the macro, it depends on what portion of the trend you're looking at. But here we have a high, here we have a low, and as of now, we have a lower high. So if this sells back down, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to either put in a higher low or a lower low. Now, if we put in a lower low, this is going to look extremely bearish for this topping out pattern, and I would expect us to come back down, retest that same area and the horizontal support that we've put in at that 9,800 range. If that does in fact break, that's when we need to really pay attention to the next retracement, which is going to be on the macro scale, essentially down here in the $7,800 range. Now, we still have plenty of time until that happens before, but you will notice that when we came down here, we hit my first target at 9,800. We hit my second target back to the upside after we sold back off. First target back to the upside was 11,150. Then we came back down exactly to the 10,100, and now we've come all the way back up to the 11,800 target, at which point in time, the next target I would expect to the downside is either a retest of that bottom here or the white target that we had put into place a while back at like 9,200. So there's still plenty of action to be had right here, but we do need to pay attention to a couple of our indicators and oscillators and what they're telling us. Previous times when we had flipped over the red, sold off underneath the yellow, the 8 and 21 moving averages, we proceeded to get nice size moves to the downside, large percentage moves to the downside, and violent sell-offs to the downside. So we need to pay attention now that we have in fact crossed down again. We are currently being held up by the 50 moving average, the 50 simple right here, and we've also been finding support on the 55 exponential moving average. As far as moving averages are concerned though, the next target, if we do sell back off to the downside, would be that 11,150 at the 89, followed by our 200 exponential at 10,000, well, basically 11,000. And then finally, we have the 377 and 200 simple moving average coming in at 10,862. And then finally, the 528 coming in at 10,700. Now, again, these are going to be slowly moving to the upside as long as price action is above them. And the closer we get to it, the slower they're going to move to the upside. But if we start to drag these moving averages back down to the downside, we can expect a violent sell-off. Now, the previous time we were able to save this price action when we flipped back over the slope on the TJD TD MACD back to blue. But one of the most bearish confirmations that you can potentially have is not only a lower high on price action, but also a retest that flips the slope back over blue, but price action fails to get above the slope line, at which point in time you expect price action to get dragged back down, the slope to flip over red and negative, and then get violent sell-off to the downside. Now, in the actual histogram, we are here at the neutral zone at the 0, so there's still plenty of room that we could move to the upside, but there's also quite a bit of room that we could move to the downside. So we need to be very careful here, as either way could essentially happen, but this typically ends with a violent sell-off, especially after the moving averages start crossing over. Also on the Jewel Thief here, you'll see we got the hard buy before that violent move to the upside, and now here we're getting the hard sell, and being below the moving averages, I would expect a violent move to the downside. We are in the neutral zone at 40, so there's plenty of room, once again, that we can move in either direction. But at this point in time, it looks more likely that we would get a situation like this, where we get a small move up, like what's happening now, followed by a violent sell-off down to the next moving average. So that, once again, would fall in line with that 11,150 range. So, and then just flipping over to the daily, looking at a little bit longer of a time frame, we can see what that's telling us. We are currently being held up just by the 8 EMA, at which point in time, if we sold back off, it's going to line back up with that 11,100 range, followed by our green moving averages, the 50-55 down here at that 10-9 range, and it's also going to fall in line with the parabolic SAR, which is green and still moving to the upside. The last time that happened previously, we did take out the SAR right afterwards, went slightly lower to the downside, and then got the violent move back up, retested our support, we're able to find support, and then move back up to the upside. But we do need to be very careful once again, as we were expecting previously to eventually come back down and touch the 200 exponential moving average, and now here it is moved all the way back up to that 10,067 range. So I still would not rule that out of the picture, as more than likely eventually, well, 100% of the time eventually, price action is going to come back down, whether it's above the 200 moving average or below it. It will come back down and touch it, and it's not unrealistic to think it would come back down to that 9,800 range and touch the 200 simple moving average as well. So now once again, we did flip the slope back over blue on the TJD TD MACD. Our histogram was green, but now we have two red histograms in a row. We haven't closed this daily yet. There's still 20 hours left that we could potentially save this trend. But typically, once you see two red histograms in a row above a blue slope price action, you expect to get a move to the downside, and that is in fact a sell signal for me personally. And then once again, looking at the TJD, the Jewel Thief, you'll see the blue histogram is up here. We got a solid stab up from the knife into a very high range at the 100 level, and then sold back off, and it's now below the purple, at which point in time we are leaving the bullish control zone and the distribution zone. I would expect us to push back up one more time, flip this back over red again, and then potentially get the hard sell and the cross to the downside, followed by violent price action. And you'll know the last time we did that was when we topped out that previous head and shoulders pattern, which would once again fall in line with the potential for another head and shoulders pattern. So well, there you have it, guys. I'm keeping it quick today. Obviously still very sick. Actually was feeling much worse yesterday and today. So I apologize for the lack of videos and a little less interaction with the community than usual. It's not serious to where I feel threatened or anything like that. But I am sicker than I have really ever been in the past. So I appreciate all the thoughts, well wishes, and prayers from the community. And thank you guys for watching and all the support. Crypto Trend Trader, and I'm out of here.